Inspiration sparks and raises our vibration, encouraging all of us to live our best lives. It's my pleasure to welcome our speaker for this evening, Jen Rawson. Jen is an ordained minister and endeavors to be an inspiration to all those she serves. She's Vice President of SCOA and the Director of Spiritual Expression Center. A warm Harmony Harbor welcome to my friend Jen.
Thank you, Jonna. Today's reading is from the English translation of the book Tears and Laughter, published in 1949 by the Philosophical Library and written by Khalil Gebran in 1930. Gebran is perhaps best known for being the author of The Prophet, one of the best-selling books of all time. He was not only a poet and a writer, but also a visual artist, and was considered by many to be a philosopher, both ahead of his time and timeless in his foresight. Our reading today is titled The Playground of Life. 1 hour devoted to the pursuit of beauty and love is worth a full century of glory given by the frightened weak to the strong. From that hour comes man's truth. And during that century, truth sleeps between the restless arms of disturbing dreams. In that hour, the soul sees for herself the natural law. And for that century, she imprisons herself behind the law of man, and she is shackled with irons of oppression. That hour was the inspiration of the Songs of Solomon, and that century was the blind power which destroyed the temple of Baalbek. That hour was the birth of the Sermon on the Mount, and that century wrecked the castles of Palmyra and the Tower of Babylon. That hour was the Hagir of Muhammad, and that century forgot Allah, Golgotha, and Sinai. 1 hour devoted to mourning and lamenting the stolen equality of the weak is nobler than a century filled with greed and usurpation. It is at that hour when the heart is purified by flaming sorrow and illuminated by the torch of love. And in the century, desires for truth are buried in the bosom of the earth. That hour is the root which must flourish. That hour is the hour of contemplation, the hour of meditation, the hour of prayer, and the hour of a new era of good. And that century is a life of Nero spent on self-investment taken solely from earthly substance. This is life, portrayed on the stage for ages, recorded earthily for centuries, lived in strangeness for years, sung as a hymn for days, exalted for but an hour, but the hour is treasured by eternity as a jewel. Well, happy Sunday, everybody. It's good to see all of you here. Zoom surely makes getting here easier during some of this crazy weather. As long as the power holds out, we're all good. It's almost the end of January, and it seems like 2025 is starting with not only freezing temperatures, but a lot of friction as well. I don't want to talk about differences today. I want to spend our time together exploring similarities instead. We all arrive in this earthly incarnation as a blank slate, our minds open and ready to absorb all of the stimuli our environment has to offer. I imagine that if we could remember those first few months of physical existence, it would have to be pretty overwhelming. So many sights and sounds, smells and tastes, and all these giant people surrounding us. Most of us can probably remember an instance as a small child, maybe walking into some place like Disneyland for the first time, or a big stadium for a sporting event. Everything seems so large, so much input, so many people. What do you pay attention to first? While we eventually grow up and out of our initial astonishment at this big wide world, we still tend to be captivated and captured by all of the input that surrounds us. It's easy to get caught up with work and family, not to mention social media, cable TV, and all the other distractions of our earthly life. As we look back on previous generations, it sure seems like life has gotten busier and busier, and we have less and less time to stop and smell the roses, to pay attention to the things that are really important and should rank high on the priority list, like love and family, and just as importantly, our spiritual health and well-being. Our upbringing can have a big influence on this. Some of us were brought up in homes without any religious affiliation at all. Many humans are raised in cultural and religious backgrounds that are common for their family and their community. As time has passed, adherence to those traditional religious beliefs so many of us have been brought up with, it's waned significantly in our country's population, down from a majority of 70% claiming a religious affiliation as late as 1999. A sizable percentage now identify themselves as spiritual but not religious, while a similar percentage don't identify as having any religious or spiritual beliefs at all. These changes in demographics can be attributed to many factors, including trauma occurring under the umbrella of religion, and the intransigence of outdated dogma that so many traditional religions adhere to. Whatever the causes that act as catalysts for this downward trend, it's an ongoing and concerning problem for organized religious institutions. The consequence of this is that there are a lot of people still searching for answers to the same questions that humankind has asked for millennia. Who am I? Why am I here? Are there other realms of existence? What happens when I die? Spiritual seekers from all walks of life share common questions and require certain characteristics to be able to find their answers. We need to be awake. We need to have discernment. And we need to develop convictions. These three qualities have been shared by sages and philosophers throughout the ages, and also by every person seeking enlightenment. To be awake is to be open to possibilities and to be aware of opportunities that present themselves for consideration. These can manifest in many different ways. Each person's journey is individual. Many of us can identify a specific light bulb moment on our spiritual path. For me, it came after many interactions and discussions with someone who helped open my eyes to my own potential as a spiritual being. I've shared this story before, but I'll be brief. Back in the day before the almighty Kindle, back when you actually had to go to a library to check out a book, I was preparing to leave on vacation and needed reading material to take along. And as I was walking through the stacks on my way to the science fiction section, a book literally fell off the top shelf without provocation and landed at my feet. Right side up, title up. The Disappearance of the Universe. Sounded kind of science fiction oriented to me, and it sure seemed like it wanted to be checked out, so I picked it up and brought it along. Turns out it was written by Gary Renard, a leading instructor and interpreter of A Course in Miracles. And no, it was not science fiction, but it was a light bulb moment for me that awakened me from a very long slumber and started me down the path I'm still traveling on today. Being conscious and in the moment for these types of occurrences is of paramount importance for anyone seeking spiritual guidance. Not all of these cues are so blatant in their appearance. Messages are many times much more subtle, making it important to maintain our awareness for clues from the divine. Moments found in meditation or prayer, whispers of hope and connection. It starts with each of us individually being consciously awake, not distracted by external diversions. Psychologist Carl Jung described it succinctly. He said, "Those who look outside dream, those who look inside awaken." Once awakened, seekers need to cultivate the process of discernment. Discernment is literally the ability to distinguish between good and bad, true and false, right and wrong. Seeking out the subtleties of what is true and right for you and your soul on your individual spiritual journey. Personal responsibility is a primary component of this process, taking ownership of the navigation and crew complement for your vessel. All of us have the capacity for discernment. Whether we choose to deploy it or not is a personal decision. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "True discernment is not about following the crowd, but about staying true to your inner voice." Again, listening for those quiet whispers of guidance. As we become accustomed to consciously using our discernment, we inevitably form convictions. Our convictions are the beliefs and opinions that we forge through the process of discernment. They are the things we know in our soul to be correct, our independent and individual tenets that are precious to us. These are the foundation stones of our spiritual pathway, the fundamentals that we can rely on through good times and during adversity. It takes courage and strength to stand up to those who don't necessarily agree with you. When I was much younger and in the midst of paramedic training, I had a professor, the dean of the program, whose favorite saying was, "Have the courage of your convictions." She would not so gently remind us of this if we were hesitating during scenario training and testing. I didn't realize until much later how true and accurate her reminder was. If you hold information to be correct through your own discernment, then that becomes a conviction you can rely on during times of stress. It helps to avoid second guessing and self-recrimination. It's just as true whether diagnosing someone having a heart attack or evaluating the veracity of a spiritual speaker or leader. Where does the information being presented fall on your conviction ladder? Is it in alignment with what you know in your soul to be true for you? Does it fall within the parameters that you use to define what spirituality means? Convictions formed in an awakened state through conscious discernment allow us to avoid some of the navigational hazards this crazy world presents us. All of us occupying this planet share the commonality of our humanity. We are born with a blank slate, imprinted through experience and environment, edited through awakening and discernment, and revealed by our mantle of convictions. We are more similar than we are different. No matter our social status, where we live, how much money we make, or who we love. Ultimately, our level of spiritual enlightenment is exposed by the grace we exhibit toward one another. Buddhist nun Pema Chodron states it this way. She says, compassion becomes real when we recognize our shared humanity. So the thought I would like to leave you with today is that we are all in this together. God bless us one and all. Thank you for allowing me to serve.